Okay. Hey, part two today of our biochemistry unit. In part two today, sorry, part one, we did our um, chemistry review and those kind of things. Part two, we're going to talk about the particular molecules, chemical bonds, those kind of things that are going to be relevant to us in biology. Okay, so some big ones that are associated with living tissue. Are there, hundreds more? Absolutely. But these are three huge ones that I think that we all need to know as high school graduates, and that those would be carbohydrates, lipids, which you probably commonly call fats and oils, and proteins. Right? You should be familiar with all of those. I don't have a nutrition wrapper within reach here, but these are all things you're going to find in the back on every nutrition label. These are the three molecules that we get energy from. All right, that's going to be the big takeaway today is that we derive energy from these three things. All right, you can eat as much iron in the world, but you will get zero energy from that because it is not a carbohydrate, a lipid, or a protein. So these three things dominate our nutrition labels because as human beings, we can break down these things. We can use these things for energy. And I should note that order is important. We're going to be talking through that today. We're going to use carbohydrates for energy first, lipids for energy second, and then proteins kind of as a last resort for energy because we use them in other ways here. So let's dive in with our first one, carbohydrates. Now you should that word should be familiar with you all, more commonly known as carbs. I don't know about you, but I think carbs are delicious. All right, think about your pastas, your breads, your sugars, those kind of things. Carbs are delicious for a reason. Your brain tells you that those kind of things taste good because that is pure energy for you. Okay, we have a sugar problem in the United States of a lot of people addicted to sugar and other carbohydrates, and it's tough because your brain rewards you for eating carbohydrates because it sees that as energy. As you're consuming it, it's telling you, yes, that's energy. Good, good. We want to make sure that we have energy. Um, in our day and age of excess, we don't need our brain to tell us that as often. So, the couple groups that we have here for carbohydrates, our first one are going to be our simple sugars. So it's just one glucose, or so one simple ring. I should back up slightly. Glucose might be a new term that we need to make sure that we know. That is kind of the most basic form of sugar. Okay, it is C6H12O6. That's for tomorrow. But glucose is going to be kind of the most basic form of carbohydrates there. We also have fructose in this category. Maybe you've heard of fructose before in the form of high fructose corn syrup. That is a artificial sweetener that we add to far too many foods, but it is a simple sugar. Your brain craves it. This is why sweets are um, that's why junk food sells so well is that you are addicted to that kind of stuff, myself included. So there's monosaccharides. So just one ring in there. It's really quick sugar. Okay, our energy, I should say. If you have a Mountain Dew, if you drink much sugar, you are going to feel more energetic momentarily after that. Disaccharides are when there's two sugars hooked together. Now remember, with those bonds, we store energy in those bonds, and so having those two hooked together gives us kind of a slower fuel, a slower burn as you're going. Not a lot slower, just minutely slower. And those two examples of those would be sucrose and lactose. Sucrose is table sugar. So if you have just sugar that you add in as you're baking, as you're putting on your Cheerios in the morning, that is sucrose. And then lactose, we should have maybe heard of lactose before. That is the sugar product that's found in dairy. So milk has lactose. Some people are lactose intolerant. That just means that you can't snip apart the two sugars in lactose. And so that lactose sugar goes down into your large intestines. Your bacteria living in your large intestines absolutely love it, and it create a ton of gas and disruption and give you quite the upset stomach as a result. So that is lactose and sucrose. And then the one that's quite a bit different from them, those complex carbohydrates, These are polysaccharides. Um, Hopefully we're picking up on these prefixes mono one, di two, poly many. So these are long chains of sugars hooked together. Okay, so there's these huge chains of sugars. Do I have a picture? Do I have a picture? No, I do not. Sorry. So there's these long chains all hooked together, and this is kind of our medium range fuel. Okay, when you have your pastas, your breads, those kind of things, it takes your digestive system in your body quite a while just to snip um, those apart. And so it's kind of a slow burning fuel as you eat it. You talk about maybe for sports teams or whatnot, you might have like a pasta dinner the night before a big competition. Some of that there is a little bit of benefit to that. Okay, a lot of it's just kind of the team building side of things, but there is a little bit of benefit to the idea of consuming these hundreds of these chains that are hundreds of units long and just slowly snipping apart that sugar that's available for you. Um, your body also makes a couple polysaccharides. Um, Plants make it in the form of starch. So potatoes are a starch, and they make it as kind of an energy storage for them. And then for us as humans and animals, we produce this thing called glycogen. Glycogen is okay. That is our medium range fuel. All right. So you eat your breakfast. I'm sorry, let's not talk about breakfast. Let's talk about dinner. You eat dinner at night. Say you eat dinner at 6 o'clock. You burn that fuel for the rest of the night. And then you go to sleep for 8 hours and you don't die in the middle of your sleep because of lack of energy. All right. That'd be bad. Your stomach might be empty. You maybe have consumed all of the energy that you have um, eaten in your last meal, but your body's still able to um, fuel itself, and that's because of this glycogen. It takes place in the liver. Your liver, all those sugars that you're not using at the time being, your liver is hooking all those together into this kind of this medium range energy storage. I'm going to throw out a time frame of kind of like that, 4 to 12 hours after a meal, depending on what kind of meal it is. But that's where this medium range storage that you have created, you're just slowly kind of snipping these apart for energy. Okay, as a I coach track and field for a living. Um, I always talk about making sure to eat about 4 hours before activity because that 4 hour range, your digestive system's pretty empty, but you've created all this glycogen. And so it's kind of this medium energy that you're able to kind of snip apart and use without having like all your blood flow going to your digestive system as a trying to break stuff down. So anyway, long story short, there are the carbohydrates. Here's our most simple one. This is going to get dive into more in depth in this in our next part, which is cell respiration. But there's our buddy glucose. That is the most simple form of sugar, and that is the fuel that drives your cells. All right, number two for a reason, because it is your second source of energy. Those are going to be lipids. There we go. You are going to refer to those as fats and oils a lot of times when you look on the back of nutrition labels. Lipids is a more all-encompassing term, kind of describes their structure a little bit better. Lipids are used for two things. Insulation. Okay, we know that. We have a lot of fat around our heads. Our brain is full of fat to help insulate things. We have, sorry, my headset died there. We have fat around our internal organs to help protect it both physically and temperature wise. And electrical insulators. Well, that's an anatomy story. But anyway, so we use that for insulation and then for long-term energy storage. So when your glucose is no longer available, when glycogen is no longer available, once those things are depleted, you're going to move on into um, burning fat for energy. Okay. Um, That's what it's there for. That's why your bodies are really good at not wasting a single calorie. So when you eat, every single calorie you consume, your bodies evolved to save almost all of it. If you think about our ancestors maybe didn't know where their next meal was coming from. And so it was hugely important to make sure that they saved every single calorie from their meals. And so they would build up these large fat reserves so that when times got tough, maybe through the winter or other times, they would have this energy available on call. Nowadays, in our society here in the United States, where you can, go to a fast food restaurant on any street corner of any town in America, um, it's a system that is hurting us. All right. It's causing more problems than good, probably, for that long-term fat energy storage because you have the same body that your ancestors had, but food is no longer an issue. Like we can you can go to the grocery store and just buy food like that. That's a capability. Not everyone has money to or security to do so. That's a different story. But food is widely available, and we are storing these lipids at an increasing rate, myself included, because that is our body's program to do. Um, anyway, we use that for our number two energy source. It is our backup energy source. So when the tank is empty from stuff that you've eaten over the last day, you start to go into this lipid burn. It is hydrophobic, meaning it does not dissolve in water. All right, so it doesn't like water. And maybe you've seen that term lipid before because when we're talking about our cell membrane, we're talking about the lipids that were attached to that as well. So not only do you use it for insulation, long-term energy storage, plays a critical role in cell formation there. Moving on to number three, proteins. Proteins are going to be our last form of energy, an emphasis on last. All right, we want to burn proteins after almost all of the fat is gone, for sure, after all the carbohydrates are gone. Your cells are really good at taking carbohydrates and turning them into our fuel source called ATP that we're going to burn through. The fat burning process is not quite as nice. There's some, you don't want to do it long term. We talk about the keto diet or different diets where you don't consume carbs, you just consume fats. Long term, it's pretty tough on your body. Like fat does not burn as well inside your cells as carbs do. So you want to find a balance. But proteins we definitely don't want to burn for energy. We will when required to. Actually, when people starve to death, what happens is they've consumed the carbohydrates, almost all the lipids, and then they've started consuming their own muscle. Their body is not eating it, but like their body is dissolving it, their own muscle, and eventually it consumes so much muscle that the heart muscle fails. Is what happens there. So when you starve to death, you've burned enough proteins. I always say about if you're trying to heat your home in the wintertime, you have like a wood fireplace in there. You want to use, wood that you cut down from outside. Whenever you start tearing down the beams and support structures inside your house to burn, you can only do that so long. And that's what proteins are. We want to use proteins to build stuff inside of you. We're gonna have a whole couple days where we talk about the use of proteins, but proteins are used for building many body tissues inside you, muscles, bones, connective tissues, all that stuff. So proteins are mainly used to build and carry out a variety of tasks inside the body. Here's an example of some, maybe not super important for us now. Yeah, don't worry about this slide. That's more so for our next bit on there. Last slide here for the day. I know it's been kind of it's an interesting topic, I think, because it's stuff that, we have those days where it's like, when am I ever going to use this in our lifetime? Well, hey, guess what? Every single one of us is going to eat. Every single one of us is going to consume carbs, proteins, lipids, and every single one of us is going to be bombarded with a bunch of information and from commercials and ads and all this stuff about diets and weight loss and all of these things. And so I think it's important to understand, where do you get your energy from? How does it get burned? What things are gimmick and aren't sustainable? But anyway, our last slide here is about ATP. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. It is what we convert all of that food into. Okay, so your body doesn't, I've been saying it burns carbohydrates, etc. Well, kind of. It takes those carbohydrates and it turns them into this ATP, which is a really small, just like packet of fuel that it can just really quickly burn to create a little burst of energy for us. We'll get into more on how that gets created from sugar in our next bit. But adenosine triphosphate is a high energy molecule. It contains two phosphate bonds that are easily broken to release energy. So we have our adenosine triphosphate here. We go through a process of cell respiration and we snip this phosphate off of there. All right. So by snipping that phosphate off, we are going to release a little packet of energy. All right. So, like I said, the energy is stored in bonds, and that is stored in ATP. So, those are the major macromolecules that drive your all the reactions inside of your body.